Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the sunny side. In today's video, we're going to be talking about and reacting to the failure and death of multiverses. So the reason that this topic is so near and dear to my heart is because I was actually a top 14 Iron Giant in the world. I'll put a clip of me whooping ass like right here. But yeah, as you can see, like I could hit the combos before they actually went on their hiatus. Iron Giant was one of the most broken characters because he was heavy and he could move fast and he could hit quick. But then they went on their hiatus, right? And they literally came back with everything being reworked, and they were gone for so long that the people that actually played the game and enjoyed the game couldn't really come back and enjoy it like how they did before. So for example, right, you could play a character and they could tell you what rating you are in that character. That's why I know that I'm a top 14 Iron Giant. But yeah, this game was so much fun. It was like the only competitor to Smash Bros. Like if you couldn't buy a Wii, if you couldn't buy a Switch and get a Smash Bros, then this game was free online. And it had a lot of familiar characters. Like, it was very similar to Smash Bros. And it had a lot of chances to succeed, but I don't know why the hiatus was such an important thing to them. Yeah, we'll get into it in this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and please comment below asparagus.
How do I explain to a normal person that the EU International Property Office has a very interesting trademark filed by Warner Brothers, and that Multiversus being shut down as quickly as it was may have actually been a blessing in disguise? I get this isn't the kind of thing I usually cover on this channel, but hey, look, Warner Brothers, the 30th of May, 2025. As of this date, Warner Bros. Entry in the platform fighter genre Multiversus has officially shut down after years of controversy and a dwindling player base. I don't think I need to introduce Multiversus, but to re-emphasize why this game was such a big deal, the platform fighter genre has never had much competition. The only mainstream game here is Smash Bros. For very obvious reasons, and the second most popular game is Brawlhalla. And as fun as Brawlhalla is, its problems make me want to scream into the void. It's a tough genre to break into, so when a non-indie, professionally produced platform fighter called Multiversus burst onto the scene with an eye-catching art style, tons of beloved Warner Bros. Characters like Looney Tunes, DC, to iconic Cartoon Network All-Stars, and had gameplay that was fast and fun, it was no question the game was going to be a hit. And it was. So what happened? Multiversus is easily one of the most high-profile failures in recent memory, going from an incredibly popular and widely beloved game during its beta that was backed with tons of free publicity from YouTubers and streamers alike, only to quickly fall into the palms of corporate greed amidst the large company merger and change of leadership, the developers being
That is so real. When they came back and we started playing it again, they were literally using the Fortnite model. They had a battle pass, they had skins. I think I might have bought the battle pass and then never played it. Like it was a mess. Why would they pause this game to make changes and not make the changes while the game is out? Because the game was really good. It was so much fun. But then they just like, it was like months. It was months that they took off. How are you expecting the fan base to actually come back after you being gone for so long?
Bought out, and updates to the game becoming more and more disappointing as the game's quality tanked. Now, I wasn't exactly a devout fan of Multiversus. I only played the game for around 16 hours during the beta and only played it a handful of times at a friend's house sometime after it officially launched. But I do have some pretty fond memories of the beta, and I feel like I'm qualified enough to talk about how badly the official release fumbled the bag in comparison. There was a lot riding on this game, and seeing it crash and burn, while justified, was definitely a little depressing. So here's the story of how Multiversus went from a leading competitor in its genre to an utter laughing stock that may or may not have been sabotaged by the behind-the-scenes nonsense happening at Warner Bros. At the time. Now, to be clear, this won't be a comprehensive breakdown of the game's entire development history, the people behind it, or whatever. Today, we're just focusing on the game's fall from grace, as really that's all that 90% of you watching this video care about, and it's all I care about as well. Also, I didn't record my own gameplay for this video because the game is essentially f***ing dead and most matches are filled with bots anyway, so please spare me for using other people's gameplay. They will all be linked in the description. So, anyway, Multiversus caught a lot of people's attention for a good number of reasons. Obviously, the game's production values helped it stick out since the majority of platform fighters outside of Smash Bros. Tend to either be indie ventures or just have far lower budgets than expected for a game of its scope. And the large variety of Warner Bros. IP featured in the game and the characters that were picked were a particularly big factor towards its success. It's almost impossible for a completely original platform fighter to become hugely popular these days. Obviously, Brawlhalla is an exception if you avoid the insane amount of collabs they've done. Seriously, you can play as The Rock in this game, but a lot of the appeal of platform fighters comes from the crossover side of it. Seeing your favorite characters from from different franchises cross over and beat the absolute shit out of each other
That's
is
what I
inherently
said.
cool and fun, and it helps sell people on the game who would otherwise be completely uninterested. It's the sole reason why Smash Bros is as big as it is, and if Kiryu isn't added in the next one, then I'll make sure the next Nintendo Direct opens with Sakurai like this. But obviously aesthetics and characters alone aren't enough to keep people coming back for more, so how was the actual gameplay of MULTIVERSUS? Well, it was fun. Obviously Smash Bros this ain't, but the game was competently designed and had a brisk pace to it. Each character had their own unique and cool movesets, from my goat Bugs Bunny smacking anvils across the screen and riding rockets, he was easily my favorite, to Superman slowly flying towards people and stringing them out of the arena. Okay, he was a little boring and bullshit, but each character felt very distinct and fun to control. Throw in some very satisfying sound design and some impactful hit stop on powerful attacks, and you had some very addictive gameplay on your hands. Again, it wasn't perfect. Some characters like the Iron Giant were just so fundamentally unfun to fight, and making any sort of changes to them could lead to an utter balance catastrophe. This is for
Stop it. Iron Giant was broken 100%. I remember I had this one chain. If you got caught in it, you would go from 0 damage to 100. I would literally juggle people. It was like you put the blaster and then you sit on them and then you cancel it after and then you kick them and then you grab, and it was like I did so much fucking shit. And like, the reason I love this game, because I play Smash Bros since like the fucking 2000s, right? But the reason I like this game is because Smash Bros has been out for so long. People have every single rhythm and every beat accounted for in that game. So in this game, when this came out, I'm like, okay, I could use my Smash Bros expertise with beloved characters and in a way that is a little different, so that there's a learning curve within that. It was a beautiful thing, but maybe it is corporate greed. I don't know what happened, but they ruined it.
Unfun to fight, and making any sort of changes to them could lead to an utter balance catastrophe. This is foreshadowing the fact they had to straight up remove him from the fucking game at one point. But for a beta, the game was incredibly promising, and it kept me hooked for a good while. Yeah, I didn't spend much time on the game overall, but those 15 hours were relatively close together for a reason. The game was just fun. But you know, there was some absolute fuckery afoot here in the beta, and there were some pretty telltale signs that this game wasn't being managed in the best way. For one thing, microtransactions. Microtransactions in a beta. Sure, they weren't the most egregious microtransactions ever implemented, but let this be a sign of things to come. Throughout the beta, there was also a bit of confusion over the characters they chose to add to the game, as it felt like a lot of character slots were just being wasted. Now, I'm not going to act like adding LeBron James wasn't objectively hilarious, but when it came to the official first few seasons of the beta, there were some very confusing decisions being made, from adding 2 Gremlins characters a month apart from each other, releasing Morty before Rick for some baffling reason, adding Black Adam for no other reason than promoting the movie at the time, which just doesn't make any sense. No one playing MULTIVERSUS is going to be watching Black Adam.
The hierarchy of power in the DC universe is about to change.
Well, no shit. And then in the second season of the beta, they added Marvin the Martian, and that was it. He was the only new character they added to the game before they shut down the beta. Marvin the Martian, out of every other Looney Tunes character they could have picked.
What did Marvin the Martian do?
They also had an all-new original character called Raindog. Everyone's made fun of Raindog already, but seriously, who invited this guy? Definitely my least favorite industry plant. At least Jeff the Land Shark is fun to play. But whatever, right? The game was fun. It was pretty damn popular at the time. I think it had something like over 100,000 concurrent players on Steam. It was a big deal. But obviously, even though the game now had a core player base, a game like this isn't going to stay that insanely popular for too long unless more content comes soon. And at the time, you could see that day by day, more people were slowly losing interest. It still had a healthy player count, but here's the thing. The game could have possibly circumvented the whole thing and kept its momentum if it wasn't for the Season 1 delay. The first season of the MULTIVERSUS beta was supposed to release on August 9th, 2022, which was set in stone for a good while. But then for some completely unknown reason, it got delayed and released a full week later. Believe it or not, I think if the season had just been released when it was intended to, they likely would have kept the momentum going. The day Season 1 dropped was the day the game's player count started to decline much faster than before. To this day, there's been no given reason for why they found it necessary to push the season back, with many people theorizing that Warner Bros was responsible, since it was during that month of 2022 that David Zaslav started going crazy with the company's tax write-offs and generally meddling with all things Warner Bros related after they merged with Discovery. The devs said this wasn't the case, but they never actually said what the real reason was. So yes, I genuinely do still believe that Zaslav going mental during that 1 week in August had some effect on MULTIVERSUS, whatever it was. Again, it's probably silly to blame the game's player count declining on an update being delayed by like 6 days, but this signs that the Fed was starting to die down were clearly there, and the season getting delayed was not going to help that. But anyway, despite its problems and many foreboding signs of mismanagement and greed, the MULTIVERSUS beta was a pretty huge success and people were loving the game. Despite the player count dwindling and the Fed dying, it had a core player base who would no doubt support the game's promising looking future. What the fuck? So yeah, in early 2023 it was announced that the MULTIVERSUS beta was being shut down and that the game was planning to have an official relaunch the next year. And this was arguably the biggest mistake they made with MULTIVERSUS because, like, genuinely, what are you doing?
I didn't know it was the next year. Why did they make it the next year? Bro, I remember how much fun this was. I literally would juggle people. I would literally, oh my god, I was so good at this game. And they just went and took it away. What are you gonna, like, why would you? There's a reason why people don't take the game off to update the game. There's a reason why Fortnite has a massive update every like Thursday, and then they just add it to the game. There's a reason. The longest that Fortnite I think's been under has been like 2 days when they had like the black hole thing. I could be wrong. When was the black hole thing? When like everything fell into a black hole, and then it was when you would log in, it was just a screen that was like a black hole on it. You know what I mean? So I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know whose advice they were getting. They 100% were doing it for the money. 100%. Which, duh. But like, if you're doing it for the money, use your brain a little bit. Plan accordingly.
Yes, MULTIVERSUS beta was a beta, but that doesn't mean the game has to be entirely shut down just for you to work on the relaunch. Like, yeah, they were definitely working on a ton of new content that we'll get into shortly, but there's no reason it couldn't have just come in the form of a normal update that transitions the game out of beta. This was a massive kneecap to the game's popularity and momentum, and was also just a bad look in general. With how misinformation easily spreads online nowadays, a lot of people genuinely believe that MULTIVERSUS shut down for good after only a few months of activity. That's how sudden and uncalled for this was. And let's not forget, the beta was monetized. It had plenty of microtransactions for cosmetics and even a battle pass. People spent money on this game with no idea all the stuff they bought was about to vanish into the digital void for a whole year. Taking people's money and then shutting down the game and their ability to use the stuff they bought is textbook AAA predatory behavior. It was absurdly scummy. It doesn't—
Oh my god, I didn't even think of it like that. That's actually so real. They added transactions to a beta, took the money and the different things, then went under for like a year. That's so scummy. Honestly, this makes me love Nintendo more. That they could have a game like Smash Bros. And just keep it pure. Keep it just a perfectly well-polished game. You know what I mean? So like, Nintendo's the only company in the gaming industry that actually puts out games that are well-polished and complete on launch. How do you have something that can compete with like the GOAT and just have it fall off? It went from like Coke and Pepsi to like Coke and sewer water.
No matter what the intent was or how much content they were making for the official launch, this was not the right call, and it was a serious hit to the game's reputation. And unfortunately, this signaled the beginning of the end, so let's talk about the relaunch. The relaunch of MULTIVERSUS was not nearly as anticipated as the beta due to the bad press the game had received for rug-pulling access to it from paying customers out of nowhere. And the lead up to the relaunch was also not received too well thanks to the marketing. While on the surface, the marketing seemed fairly normal, you know, just posting more clips and trailers to drum up hype for the relaunch, many people were paying close attention to the gameplay they were showing off, and oh my god, the game looks like shit. Jesus Christ, the game speed, what did they do? Part of what made MULTIVERSUS so fun was how fast it was. It had a great pace to it, and one of the most admired qualities of any platform fighter is usually its speed. The new gameplay being shown off was significantly slowed down. Everything looked so much more floaty and awkward, the animations looked off, and the hit stop that happened when hitting an enemy really hard was now adding to the horrible game feel now that everything was slower. Many prayed that the trailers were just slowing down the gameplay in order to show everything off and that the game speed was going to be relatively unchanged, but honestly this was some very desperate but understandable cope. The game finally relaunched on May 28th, 2024, and while for the first few days it managed to get back similar numbers to the beta launch, people were very divided on the quality of the game. The concerns over the footage were very well founded. The game was so much slower now and felt so much worse to play than it looked. It was still a playable game with its own unique quirks, but it was so much more boring and unsatisfying. Strings and combos were way too easy to pull off now due to the floaty physics, making characters like the Iron Giant an absolute nightmare to play against. Again, they had to remove him from the game for a while.
Me being top 14 in the world now feels like a statement that I shouldn't say, but I'm gonna stand by that, all right? I was top 14 in the world. How many Iron Giants were there? I don't know, but I was top 14.
The feedback of getting hit by something, experiencing sluggish hit stop, and then slowly falling through the air was awful. And you combine that with how big the character models were compared to the microscopic sizes of some stages, and it just God, it sucked! From a gameplay perspective, there was still some fun to be had, and the game still had its own identity with the perk system and focusing on 2v2s rather than free-for-alls. But compared to how it was previously, it was pretty damn rough. And while future updates would seek to fix the balancing issues, fixing Iron Giant for one, there were so many more confusing gameplay changes being made, the most evident of which being the introduction of shields, an addition that conflicted heavily with the game's focus on dodging and parrying attacks. They were slow and weren't fun to use, and they sucked to play against. But while the gameplay side of things was still at the very least acceptable, the same could not be said about the game's progression system and rampant microtransactions. As dumb as it was to put microtransactions in the game's beta, they weren't the worst thing ever. The finished version of MULTIVERSUS, however, has some of the most despicable paywall progression I've ever seen. Sure, a free-to-play game has to make money somehow, but paywalling other unlockable characters in a platform fighter is all kinds of messed up. Sure, they weren't entirely paywalled, you could theoretically unlock every character in the game for free by grinding in-game currency, but as you can probably imagine, that takes forever, and the reason it takes forever is so you get sick of the grind and hand over your wallet. It's the oldest trick in the microtransaction book, and effectively made MULTIVERSUS a pay-to-win game. They did add this new thing called Fighter's Road to help make unlocking all the characters for free more straightforward and less grindy, and while it did somewhat accomplish that, if you wanted a specific character over all the others, then, well, tough shit, unfortunately. You have to unlock a bunch of random characters you don't want to play before you finally get the one you wanted the whole time, making the grind feel even worse, especially since any new characters that were added to the game were poorly tacked on to the very end of the road itself, so they by far took the longest to obtain. The effort put in to try and earn every single character without spending money was just not worth it. The progression system and unlocking characters was awful across the board, and in my eyes made MULTIVERSUS one of the greediest games I have ever seen. And this is probably worth noting, but when MULTIVERSUS began development, it was back when Warner Bros. Wasn't merged with Discovery. The game was released shortly after the merger completed and when David Zaslav became CEO. And while the monetization back then wasn't great, it's clear that the relaunch had Warner Bros. Filthy little handprints all over it. David Zaslav is a money-grubbing jackass who will do anything to pull his company out of debt, even if that means crippling the progression and player retention of an already profitable game just for a short-term boost in revenue. I do not believe for a second that the way this game was monetized was a conscious decision made by the devs. It's a clear result of how much Warner Bros. Has changed and evolved since the game's beta launched in 2022. The higher-ups didn't care about creating a sustainable live service experience and just wanted to squeeze as much money out as possible until players got fed up and left, and the disappointments just kept rolling in.
I know at the top of this I say like we'll talk about and react to the video, but this guy's spitting bars. Like what can I add? What can I actually add? Everything he's saying is facts. Warner Brothers had something beautiful and they biffed it all up. I don't know what else I can say. They just, I'm just disappointed. I'm just disappointed in the time and effort and everything that I put into this game. Maybe I should just go back to Smash Bros.
The single-player campaign was lazy and uninteresting, the game's ranked mode was mysteriously absent despite being in the fucking beta and took until the second season to be added, and the questionable character choices were really starting to take the piss at this point. While Season 1 had a strong start with the addition of the Joker, Jason Voorhees, and Agent Smith, they wasted a slot on the Banana Guard from Adventure Time as like a joke character, and if the game hadn't been shut down for a year and had a better roster, this would have likely been seen as the funny meme pick that it was, but people were just annoyed this was wasting character slots for the joke pick. Season 2 added Samurai Jack and Beetlejuice, no complaints there. Season 3 added the Powerpuff Girls, that's fine, but then there's Nubia. Now, I consider myself to be relatively well versed when it comes to comics, but even I had to ask, who the fuck is Nubia? Okay, so she's a Wonder Woman character. That's fine, though she seems to be fairly obscure compared to any other DC character they could have put in the game before her. Again, she's not a bad pick, but the priorities regarding which characters make it into the game is all over the place. They had Morty before Rick, they had Harley before Joker, they released 2 Gremlin characters separately, Black Adam is here for some reason, Marvin over any other Looney Tunes character, and who the fuck is Rain Dog? By the way, the Powerpuff Girls launched with an incredibly broken Infinite that could instantly knock any opponent off the stage the moment they spawn in, and this one one clip did so much damage to the perception of the game's balance, it's crazy. Then Season 4 added Raven from Teen Titans. Again, feels weird that she gets in over other DC characters and even the other members of the Teen Titans, but okay. And then Marceline from Adventure Time gets in, which makes the inclusion of the Banana Guard even more of a f*** up because they wasted the character slot on a joke character from Adventure Time, and now Adventure Time has some of the most reps in the entire game. And then we have the 5th and final season, which caps off Multiversus' journey with Aquaman and Lola Bunny. Dear God, what a waste. Given that none of these characters would be accepted, the game just needed to prioritize some other characters to make their inclusions not feel weird and jarring. You can't just add Morty and then delay Rick for like 2 months while adding another different character before him. That's not normal. But with all of that said regarding the relaunch, things were not going too well. The update that added shields was kind of the last straw for a good percentage of the player base. Balance updates were controversial, the new content was questionable, and the monetization was just way too predatory even by the standards of most free-to-play games out there. It's not surprising that shortly after the boost in player numbers from the relaunch, things quickly nosedived. Only a couple of months after launch, the concurrent player counts dropped from around 100,000 to barely scraping 5,000. By the end of 2024, the game was struggling to retain even 1,000 players. Obviously, this doesn't tell the full story as the game is still available on consoles, but the drop is still staggering. And because of this, the game was cooked. It was announced at the start of 2025 the game would be shutting down for good, and as of the upload date of this video, you could no longer download Multiversus. The game is dead and buried. Frustratingly, after this announcement, the game teased a new update showing increased game speed that somewhat resembled how the beta played. And I think this is the perfect representation of just how poorly this game was handled. The game is being shut down, and now you choose to fix one of the biggest issues with the relaunch? The tale of Multiversus is very depressing. The game had so much promise and the beta was so much fun despite its flaws, but the devs just fumbled the bag when it came to the gameplay, and Warner Brothers had its way with how the game was monetized, all but ensuring its fate and that the game would soon be dead and forgotten alongside the rest of the failures of the platform fighter genre. Maybe one day there will be a new platform fighter that can stand on its own 2 feet among Smash Bros and Brawlhalla and not die after a year of service, but it doesn't seem to be happening anytime soon. Rest in peace, Multiversus.
Okay, yeah, final thoughts. Like, what more can I really say? They found a diamond and then they fucking destroyed it. But they had something beautiful and they had it perfect. They had it down pat, right? But then corporate greed and the devs just, I guess, not giving a fuck anymore ruined it all. But yeah, this was a fun time, a fun little blink within the giant lexicon of games that we have right now. But yeah, what can I say? I hope you enjoy the video and I hope to see you guys next time. Peace.